So our team name is Marco Polo, and this name was derived by the inspiration of the famous explorer Marco Polo, who traveled the Silk Road and exchanged cultures and diversity with that. So our project's inspiration started with our case study of the house on Fox Lake by Williamson. Through the building's typology, the architects created an abstraction and translation of the cultural and historic characteristics of their client. Inspired by the traditional Korean Hanok homes, the architects explore a foreign cultural reference, then adapt it to the Canadian landscape and environment. Looking deep into the cultural perspectives, the architects may have asked, how can we translate an identity for two diverse cultures into one design? So for our diagram 1 for this case study, we broke down the case study's building elements, culture identities, and site characteristics into subcategories that represent potential positions of research that the architects may have focused on. This diagram reveals patterns and a hierarchy with the building's design choices.
So here for our diagram 2, we started to integrate the 3 different cultures and climate, thinking about the Hanok traditional home, kind of the contemporary, like modernized, contractor-driven, standard Americanized home, and then also the climate and landscape of the Canadian location. And so with that, like, we knew certain things in their process had to be edited out, some things that didn't match with the climate that were kind of impractical, and then things that were also necessary had to be brought to the surface. So things that specifically for the case study that remained were the roof pitch, certain programmatic elements and arrangements, and then also materiality is kind of expressed to help keep the traditional ornamentation and feel of the Korean culture. And so then for our research, we're proposing that we're investigating ways that we can reintroduce culture into the suburban American process in America, because it's kind of a contractor-driven process where we feel cultural identification has been lost. Homes are made quickly and cost-effective, and resulting in minimal variations that don't necessarily reflect those who inhabit the space.
So in order to get a sense of the culture that surrounds us in our various neighborhoods, we wanted to look into different factors that influence design choices within our homes we see today. So first we started to look at demographics, and doing this, we looked at the demographics of our 3 towns, which are mainly rural, suburban, and urban. So looking at different heritages within Michigan, we concluded that the most native people in Michigan were from Mexico, and then followed by Indians, and then people from Iraq. So to do a deeper dive on this, we began to look at the former populations of each of these 3 cities, more specifically, as well as race and ethnicity. So looking at 2017 using the datausa.io resource, we've seen that Bloomfield Hills had 751 people that were born outside the United States, which was higher than the national average, which was 17.4%, meaning that the rate has been increasing since 2016. There are 300 Asian and 283 2 or more race residents. The second and third most ethnic groups. Looking at Petoskey now, as of 2017, 3.23% of Petoskey, Michigan residents were born outside the United States, which was lower than the national average of 13.3%. And moving on to Armada, as of 2017, 3.77% of Armada residents were born outside the United States, which is also lower than the national average.
We also wanted to look into how property value might impact these typologies in these suburban homes. So displayed here is we have the 3 different property values that range pretty greatly among the 3 different towns in Michigan. So you can see in Bloomfield Hills, the median property value is $840,300. And then for Petoskey, the median property value is $178,900. And then moving on to Armada, the property value goes down to $145,500. And then we also wanted to look into household income between the 3 towns, as this could have a huge impact on the initial design potential and the outcomes for the home. And the diagrams above, we can see a pretty significant difference among the 3 towns' median household income, with Bloomfield Hills coming in about $186,000 and Petoskey at $37,000 and Armada at $53,000. Next, our research method consisted of field studies through direct observation of our suburban context in 3 separate towns. Individually, we each documented surrounding suburban homes, looking for patterns as well as distinctions. We paused our video at certain moments when we found similarities or atypical homes.
After doing initial investigations of data online, we then took to investigate on the ground, where we took photographs and videoed our own personal neighborhoods, and then came back and we tried to discuss and collaborate on how they were similar, how they were different, and by like collaging these images all together and arranging them like where there were similarities,
they were different. And from that, we kind of picked out many of the materiality ways that things were expressed, but also kind of our gut reactions to how we know things are generally laid out in our neighborhood within these style of homes. And then from there, what we ended up concluding that if we were to try and reintroduce culture into some of our own neighborhoods, thinking about what that process might entail. So kind of coming up with our standardized procedure, and based on the knowledge that we gained from our case study as well as from our own investigations. Like initially, it would start out with a baseline study of these cultures that are in question. So thinking about how Michigan has a prevalent Mexican culture or background, and then so investigating what their type of architecture is, what's important to them and what's important to their culture, and then from there editing out the features that disagree or conflict with the climate demands. So there's certain things about that are different even just between where I live in Petoskey to where Brandon and Aaron live. So there's those things that would have to be brought into consideration, as well as the various different conditions if we were still sticking with our Mexican heritage. Things like the terracotta roof we would try to keep, but there also raises questions of if it's practical or not. And so the third step is then manipulating those programming materials to reflect our geographic location and the cultural features. And on the surface, it kind of sounds like it might stick out like a sore thumb, but then again, we kind of were discussing that with our classmate or with our group mates, and so does sticking a Korean Hanukkah in the middle of Canada. So it's all about that process of editing that really makes or breaks the project.